Indra Nooyi, thank you very, very much for being with us and agreeing to discuss your new book, My Life in Full. I promise you, Indra Nooyi, I seldom use this old phrase, but it is absolutely true about this book. It is honestly unputdownable.
Oh my God.
I learned a lot, enjoyed the stories and anecdotes, loved your intrinsically Indian DNA, and living in America as to boot, and so much more, which we shall go into. I have actually so much to discuss, so many questions to ask you. So Indra, do you have the next 6 hours or 7 hours to spare?
Prannoy, for you, as much time as you want. You're the only person I grant this privilege to.
I'm struck by, Indra, 3 factors that you have faced in your life. First, the fight against bias. The bias against being a woman, which is underlying in this book, and the bias against diversity, being from India. Second, your fight to balance your work life and your home family life. And third, the fight to prove that in the world of business, performance with purpose is not only possible, but complementary and essential. So these are 3 big ones. There are many other fights, but would you say these 3 are the big fights of your life?
I would say the second and the third for sure are big fights. The first one, I'd say, everybody faces bias at some point in their life. I'd say that in my case, as long as you performed, as long as you were competent, it was a manageable and addressable bias. At the margin, there's always going to be there. So, but I wouldn't view that as a major conflict that I had to face. Number 2 and number 3, absolutely agree.
Right. But I do feel you're being a bit modest there, because you did have quite a lot of, you entered a world, you started out with a bias against women. In fact, you write that the time that you joined Pepsi, every single CEO of the top 500 biggest companies in America was male. I mean, can we just start with some clear instances where you faced some form of bias against you as a woman? Because understanding that, as you say, it may not, you can fight against it. So others who listen to you will find these instances an inspiration and a guide to women who are going through similar biases now, even in India, actually. Mainly in India.
So let me, in fact, take you back to when I was born and when I was sort of growing up in India. I sort of came back to me that I was born 8 years after independence. So I was one of the early frame breakers, if you want to call it that. One of the early people who went to the IIMs. I was having a call with IIM Calcutta last week. I was the 11th batch.
Calcutta, I want to say that made all the difference in your life. You owe Calcutta what you are. I have
true, absolutely true. It's Calcutta, the Bengali culture.
Sorry, carry on.
Impressive. I love it. But I was the 11th batch from IIM Calcutta, the 11th group of students to go through it. And one of the handful of women who graduated from IIM Calcutta. So in so many ways, I was one of the new entrants into the world of business, into the world of professional education. And I was an anomaly, an oddity. At the same time, somebody to be respected, because people looked at me and said, if she could break through a male bastion, there should be something in her. So I also got the respect and the support of certain people in power, because they viewed me as, hey, if she could break through all of these barriers, she should be something and we ought to protect her. So I was the beneficiary and the person who was challenged. That's the first point. Once I crossed the oceans and came to the United States.
Can I just interrupt there? A great supporter and a great influence was your grandfather. And there are very emotional bits about that. And of course, your father, and we'll come to your mother as well throughout your life. But your grandfather, you miss him a lot.
Well, I tell you, the biggest breakthrough in my life was that my grandfather and my father basically said the girls are going to be treated on par with all the men, because they should be allowed to be educated, they should be allowed to dream, they should be allowed to fly. And I think that made all the difference in the world, because we were never held back because of our gender, my sister and I. We were treated on par and, in fact, encouraged and supported. And my mother, in turn, had the appropriate foot on the brake, but she also had the foot on the accelerator. So I lucked out from a family perspective.
Yes. So you were saying
then,
one where people saw that you're doing this at a time where it was male dominated. That in itself was a kind of a breakthrough. Other significant things that helped you.
The role of mentors. I could not have done it in those days and subsequently, because at every point in my life, even when I crossed the oceans and came to the United States, I was one of the very few women in corporate America those days. Now, the numbers are much, much higher. But, when I graduated from Yale School of Management, I think the class was about 25 or 30% women. And in consulting, there were very few women. So at every point, I was breaking the mold of who was being employed, who was rising to senior positions. But at every point in time, a male stepped up and said, I'm going to mentor this person. I'm going to support her. So in a way, again, winning the lottery in its own way, people just leaned in and said, there's something about her we like. Her work ethic, how she looks at issues, how she makes sure that she delivers on time and great quality. I'd like to be viewed as her supporter and her mentor. And right through my life, from my time in India, all the way through the United States, to the final PepsiCo job that I did in corporate America, I've always had extraordinary mentors who stepped up to coach me, develop me, support me, and in turn, I gave them my loyalty. It's a two-way street.
Yes, I must say, that comes out in the book. The mentors that you had, they were, of course, you must have been exceptionally good, and it was great for them to have somebody who worked so well and worked so hard. But they were so kind to you, so many of them. Right from the beginning, I remember you were queuing up sort of against some odds to get your visa to go to America, and you had to queue up from 9 at night and get a token at 6 in the morning.
Yep.
And you had two bosses. One boss came to you late at night and gave you a soup or something, and the next boss came to you at 5 in the morning and gave you a cup of tea or coffee. Tell us about that. I mean, what wonderful people.
No, I was, in those days, going to the United States, getting a visa was very difficult. And you had to queue up outside the U.S. consulate in Chennai at 9 p.m. in the night. So you could get a token in the morning because only 50 interviews were granted every day. I lined up. I was the only woman in the line. And it surprised me that my two bosses at Metro Beers, from Norman Wade and S.L. Rao, came one after the other with either coffee or coffee and breakfast at 5 a.m. in the morning. I mean, everybody in the line was flabbergasted because, what's it about this woman that her bosses show up so kindly and, offer this coffee and breakfast. So I was just incredibly surprised and touched, but it also showed that even though I was not coming back to Maitre Beardsell, they felt proud that I was going to go do something big, and they felt they should support me and encourage me. So I'm deeply grateful and in awe of what those two men did.
Those two men and so many others in your life that really treated you as a daughter, encouraged you, mentored you, and then you obviously learned from them because you gave it back to your own, when you became CEO. I do remember lots of things, but one particular instance where you wrote letters to all your staff, colleagues, parents, thanking the parents for allowing their child or gifting their child to Pepsi. And you got amazing, wonderful emotional responses from the parents, right?
Yep. I think, just completing this conversation on the mentors and how they supported the arc of my life. I think that mentors are wonderful, provided you make sure that you give them the appropriate respect. The one thing I would say to all young women and young people, look, I had the lottery of luck, a lottery of life in terms of the kind of family I was born into. The one plea that I have for many families, support the girls in your family as much as you support the guys, because the girls are hungry, they want to be educated, so support them. Don't have this discrimination. And I'll say the society overall, where families discriminate against the women, let's lean in and make sure the girl child is also educated, because education of the girl child is good for the family. And
Right.
then coming now to your question or your comment, Prannoy, I think that when you have people working for you, you've got to look at them as real assets, as people with emotions, people with families, people with joys and troubles, that they carry with them. And you've got to look at them as a whole person as opposed to a tool of the trade. Very often we look at them as a pair of hands. I just decided I was going to look at them more holistically and make sure that people around them who supported them and allowed them to work tirelessly for PepsiCo should be thanked too. So that's what prompted me to write letters to the parents and the spouses of all my senior executives. And I think I wrote about 400 letters in my time at PepsiCo.
Wow, to the parents. And apparently one of the mothers who went to her home eventually when she was a little infirm, the only thing she hung up in her room, a frame, one of your letters framed, thanking her for sending her child to Pepsi.
Oh, absolutely. And that was a very touching letter, but even more amusing or, in a nice way was one of the senior Indian origin executives wrote me saying that his father made 100 copies of the letter and pulled a chair in the basement of his apartment building. And every resident that came in, he gave him a copy of the letter and said, I want you to see what the chairman of the company thinks of my son. To me, I felt great about it because it's a sense of pride.
That's
you
lovely.
want parents to be proud of their kids. And this is a positive report card.
Well, I always tell this to all the kids at our organization and my own kids. All the good in you, nothing to do with you, it's your parents, so thank them.
I agree.
So actually...
Completely. I completely agree with
but
you.
going back to these biases that, to counter and overcome the bias against being a woman, as you said, you could do it, you can still do it, but it's still a major problem in India and in many countries. But you also had to fight a bias against diversity, meaning that you were not white and you were living in a white man's world. In fact, you write that when you joined Pepsi, the top 15 posts were all held by white males. But this was not new. You'd faced it when you were trying to buy a house in a white area.
Yeah.
There were comments about your clothes at Yale when you went for job interviews. How did you handle those tough situations? As you say, you can fight them, but just for all the kids, what would happen when you went to an interview? What would you wear and what would people say? You could...
today there are a lot of support structures. No, but today there are a lot of support structures for young people in terms of how to dress, how to talk, how to present yourself. Again, let's not forget the time that I was doing these interviews and entering the workforce. But I want to turn this around a little bit, Prannoy. I chose to come to the United States. I wasn't fleeing persecution. I wasn't fleeing anything. I chose to come to the United States. It's a different country, different people. And clearly, I was a minority coming into the country, and I had to earn my place in the country. And while there might have been 5 or 10% of the people who were discriminatory, I would say I should define the country based on the other 90 or 95. And I would say, by and large, people have been wonderful, welcoming, and I'll go so far as to say the fact that an immigrant woman, a woman of color, could have ascended to the CEO of one of the most iconic American companies can only happen in the United States.
Perhaps one of the biggest challenges that comes through in this book is your story of the constant struggle to balance work life and family life. Your amazing, supportive and talented husband, and more I'll talk about him later, because he's actually a huge success in his own right, but he gave up so much. And your mother, who you just mentioned, who played such an important role in you pressing the accelerator and pressing the brakes. I mean, she was very... Tell us about that night which you write about when your mother said to you, please leave your crown in the garage. And the deeper meaning it had for you at that time in so many different levels.
The story, which is well documented, when I came home after hearing that I was going to be president and be on the board, this was way back in 2000, it was sort of something so big for me, and I was overwhelmed with emotion that I was going to be ascending to such an important position and on the board of directors of PepsiCo too at the same time. So I rushed home to tell the news, and it was late in the night, and my mother greeted me with, "I don't want to hear any news. If you have it, just go get the milk." You know, being the dutiful daughter, I just went and got the milk, and I said, "Couldn't you let me just share my big news with you? Because I told you I had big news. And instead, all that you tell me is to go get the milk." To which point she said, "Okay, tell me the news." But after I told her, she said, "It's fine that you're president on the board of directors, but those are all irrelevant. When you enter this house, you're the mother, the daughter, the wife, the daughter-in-law. Don't forget your responsibilities, and just do me a favor, leave your crown in the garage." Now, at that point, I must say I was upset. I was upset. I'll tell you why I was upset. Because I thought,
of course,
occasionally as women should be allowed to bring the crown into the house. I also felt that had this been a man, he would have been celebrated for the crown. And at that point, I was upset. But subsequently, I've been thinking about it a lot and saying to myself, you know, I think both husband and wife should leave their crowns in the garage. And when you come home, you're the mom and dad, you're the daughter and son, or daughter-in-law and son, whatever it is. And I think at home, we've got to be playing the roles that we should be playing, not try to confuse the roles that we should be playing. Yeah. And basically what my mother was saying to me, the deeper meaning was, if you want to have kids that, you know, grow up to be productive citizens, if you want to maintain your marriage, if you want to make sure that you take care of the elders that you're responsible for, you know, I have a huge multi-generational responsibility deep in me. She was saying, you've got to leave the crown in the garage. Because if you come home and think all of them work for you, you're going to lose them all. And, you know, there are times I may slip into that role, but I don't think I've ever brought the crown into the house and tried to...
Wonderful lesson, yeah. But, you know, you talk about your hard work. I mean, not talk about it. It's so evident your hard work. But you also had a huge fun side to you. You love cricket. You're a fan of the Yankees, the Yale baseball team, and you were in a band at school, and you played the guitar, did you? And you sang songs. And your group, by the way, was called Logarithms, which was the same name as a friend of mine, Chitranjan Bakshi, at school with me, had a band with exactly the same name, the Logarithms. Talk about coincidence, but that's an important part of your life, right? Life, music,
look,
sports.
At my core, I was a fun person. That's who I was. In fact, when my sister was incredibly smart and getting all the academic honors and having some fun, I was doing well in school, but definitely not getting the academic honors. I was much more focused on what can I get involved in? What kind of academic, non-academic pursuits can I go after? How can I do things for society? How can I start a cricket team? How can I climb trees and fall down and break my hand? I mean, I did everything that you wouldn't expect from a woman. But you know what? My parents never stopped me. When I played cricket with my brother and his friends, it was like, go have fun, you know, go play cricket with the boys in the home, in the yard, in the home. So I loved all this stuff. And playing the guitar, as long as you still do well in school, you can play the guitar. You can play in a band.
Lovely.
And as long as all rehearsals are at our house and not in somebody else's house, you can play in a band. So it was always within a framework, within a frame.
Yes.
But you had freedom within the frame.
Right. So and I mean, you also, I read that when you were in America and you still love music, you love music on the flight to America. When you went to Connecticut, was it?
So when I first got on the plane, when I got on the plane, I was seated in economy because those days that's all we could afford. And the person sitting next to me, or I think it was more in the lounge, economy lounge in those days, he asked me what I was going to do in the U.S. I told him I was going to Yale University in Connecticut. I was very phonetic in spelling it out, and I was proud that I got it right. He pulled me aside and he said, look, I want to explain something to you. Connecticut is not called Connecticut, it's Connecticut. And that's how it's pronounced. And he made me repeat it a few times. And I have to tell you, you didn't have to do that. He didn't have to do that. He did it in a way that it didn't sound insulting. It sounded like a helpful person trying to help me land in the US in the right way. So again, interesting help from somebody.
I just, when you talk about hard work, I mean, as I said, it's a terrible example you set. How you handle the work-home balance. You worked incredibly hard. I give you an example from your book. You often you got to work at 6 a.m. You took a flight to Washington at 10 a.m., had meetings in Washington, flew back, got back to your office at 4 p.m., carried on working in office at 10 p.m. night, and often you came home late and you put on your night clothes just to show your daughters that you were not going back to work. You chat with them and then go up to your desk, home desk, and work even then. I mean, this is not a good example.
Well, when in crunch times, when you're in the middle of a major transaction or a major FTC approval process, you're going to have to give it your all. At the same time, you can't forget your familial responsibilities. So I think in crunch times, I did 3 jobs at the same time and tried to be a small, decent mother, not a big, role as a mother, but a tiny role as a mother. In those days, my kids missed me, but, at that time, I had to get the Quaker Road steel done. So, the company needed my undivided attention. I think one of the big benefits I had, again, talk about luck, I didn't need much sleep, and I had the ability to speed read and retain a lot. So speed reading, having good memory, not having much sleep was great.
Amazing. But what does come through strongly in your book also, and a lot of people have already told me about this before I read the book, is about your husband, Raj. He is brilliant and successful in his own right, and how much he supported you. In fact, you call him a prince of a man. Of course, neither of you can actually figure out who proposed to who, but we'll leave that till later. And you also called him your lifeboat. Can you tell us some of the instances of your husband Raj's support for you that still today amazes you?
He is a very, very special man. And somebody once said to me, God, I wish we all could have a Raj in our life, which is true. And it's not just Raj. I had the luck that I was marrying into a family that also supported me. My entire in-law family are bigger supporters of me than anybody in my own family. The way they call and say, how's your stress level? Are you okay? We're all there to support you. They all read the internet articles about me and celebrate it. So I think I was lucky to be married into an extraordinary family, educated, supportive, never once questioning my decisions or saying, why don't you quit your job and stay home? So that's a lucky one. Now let me talk about Raj himself. I think that in my life, I made great decisions, but this one was a damn good one. And I'm glad I met Raj. I'm glad he's still in my life. And, the guy is so smart that I can actually discuss an issue with him, a business issue, if I'm stuck somewhere. And he has a way of demystifying it and helping me think through it, albeit a little mathematically. He tends to write equations about everything, and I wish he would just talk about it. But you know what? Those equations stick in my head. So I'm very grateful to him for that. The other thing is he can take the emotion out of the discussion and make it more of a discussion of the issues, which is unbelievable. He always believed our marriage was a partnership and it had to be equal. And there are times that he would have to do more. There are other times that I would have to do more. I would say that on balance, he's always done a little bit more, but he's been the rock, this biggest support. There's no question that I am a better person for him.
But even with all that support from Raj, your husband, you do write that for any woman, you actually say this, any woman who wants to get to the very top, frankly, focusing on family life a lot is a near impossibility, you write. Women will need extended family support.
Mm-hmm.
And so many members of your family and Raj's family used to fly out to live with you and to look after your children. So the Indian joint family, where there's intergenerational support in households, all under one roof, is a major advantage to men and women business leaders, right?
I think multi-generational living, especially with an aging population, is critically important. So I'm all for multi-generational living. But multi-generational living should not become a burden on the young family. Let me tell you where I'm worried about. I think in my case, the multi-generational living worked because people helped out. There were tensions, don't get me wrong, because their model for bringing up the grandkids is different than our model for bringing up our kids. So there's a tension that's inherent in that. Where it becomes a hassle is if the woman of the house goes out to work and comes back and is also expected to do all the housework and loses the power of the purse because her paycheck is taken away and other people control the spending. I think that's wrong. So I think what one has to think about, and again, it's a family choice decision. It's not for me to dictate how it should work. But I just think of it from the female perspective and say, women should have the power of the purse. They should have economic freedom. As my father said, I don't ever want you girls to put your hand out and have to ask somebody for money. You should stand on your own 2 feet. And it's very important that people recognize the contributions of women in the house and outside the house on par with the men. Women should not be born.
And Raj's father also told you, you're right, that Raj's father told you, keep on working, make sure you work and get to the top.
Till he passed away, he told me that. And you know what is very touching? Raj is a granduncle who's, I think, in his 90s. Even today, he calls and says, I hope everything is going well. I hope you're keeping yourself busy doing things. You have to give back to society. He reads all the internet articles that he can on me. I mean, this man is extraordinary. That he does it from a little village in Karnataka is just, very touching.
Very touching. And that's inspiring. Before I want to go into the way you ran Pepsi and the big challenges of convincing people that it's not just cold-hearted profits. You have performance with a purpose. But before I go into that, I want to go back quickly and give you a tough time now about your music, because you were great at music at school, college, and every party you'd go to, they would ask you to sing a song. And I believe one of the songs they always asked you to sing was My Way. So I would, all of us, just want you to sing a couple of lines for us from My Way.
So I want to be clear. I never sang My Way. It's Roger Enrico who sang My Way. Roger believed
Okay, which one did you sing then?
Now, I was never asked to sing. When I was a kid, the family would make me sing. But I have to tell you, it was Roger Enrico who insisted on singing My Way and American Pie 2 or 3 times in a karaoke party. But I have to tell you, I love music. I love singing. We have a lot of karaoke parties, but I gave up performing a long time ago, Prannoy, because,
Oh, no.
Oh,
you're not getting away with it that easy.
Sure, I gave
One
up
line
singing.
of some song. One line of some song of the earlier generation.
All the songs we used to sing as part of the logarithms, we'd sing songs like Besame Mucho or Green Sleeves or
lovely.
Yummy, Yummy, Yummy. Yummy, 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 I got love in my tummy and I feel like loving you. Love you such a sweet thing, good enough to eat thing and the best thing I want to do. Something like that.
Super. God, what do you mean you, of course, were asked to sing all the time? That was super. Well, I think we'll have another show, half an hour with you just singing, shall we? That's later.
Oh, yeah, right. That's right. So that everybody can tune out. Absolutely.
Life in Pepsi and how you changed the ethos at Pepsi. And frankly, how you changed a lot of things. It was a game changer for many people afterwards. That Pepsi, that the world of business is not just a cold, hard-hearted calculation of profits. You believed in PWP, performance with purpose. And as you worked to make you worked on several things. I just give a couple of examples. It cut down water that was used in making Pepsi from 2.5 gallons to 1.5. That's a huge, saving of water for many people around the world. On the health front, you got a whole lot of people together, and you managed to cut back calories by 6 trillion in 5 years or something, when the target was just 1.5 trillion, and you did 6 trillion, and so much more on both the health and environment front. And at the same time, and this is what's important, with the purpose, you still made sure that Pepsi gave excellent returns to your shareholders. I think you mentioned that Pepsi's returns in your first 6 years was 28% compared to minus 1.25% by the stock market. But I do feel that this performance with purpose has been a game changer, as I said, because so many CEOs in America like Satya Nadella, Sundar Pichai, and many, many more are now admired because they believe in running a business with both head and heart. But when you first proposed it, it was greeted with alarm in some quarters and saying you're getting soft. And one, I think, portfolio investor asked you, who do you think you are, Mother Teresa? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
So it was tough to change cold-heartedness to performance with purpose. Was it?
So, in my case, I wasn't trying to be soft or work on the hard numbers. That's not what I was trying to do. All that I was trying to do is future-proof the company. I wanted our company, PepsiCo, to be successful well into the future and not go into any trouble in societies or countries because of the business model we had. So my articulation of performance with purpose was not about giving money we made away for certain causes. It was, what if we changed the way we made money? What if we created a company where we cut the costs by doing the right things for society, and we did the right things for society so that society would give us a license to operate and we would be successful well into the future. The best example is water, what you talked about, Prannoy. My point was, we had plants, Pepsi plants, Frito-Lay plants all over the world, and many of them were in water-distressed areas. How can we justify using 2.5 liters of water to make a liter of Pepsi when the town that we were located in was water distressed? And so my simple point was, let us reduce the water usage drastically. And if we did that, towns would give us a license to operate. Nobody would shut us down. And guess what? We would also save costs. The timing may be different because you first have to invest to reduce the water usage, and then you get the benefit. So all that I wanted to do was run the company for the duration of the company by balancing the level and duration of returns. So whether it was recycling of plastic, whether it was water usage, reducing our carbon footprint, thereby saving electricity costs, and making the company a place where everybody wanted to come to work, and PepsiCo meant we could hire the best and the brightest, and then we could actually perform better as a company. I think if we articulated it as, here's a different way to make money, people wouldn't sign up to it because it's always stated in money terms. Performance with purpose was a way to frame it, to engage people's emotions, at the same time say performance and purpose are linked. If you don't deliver performance, you can't invest in purpose. And if you don't deliver purpose, you can't deliver performance. It was a virtuous circle. That's the key message of what I was trying to do.
Yeah, and you might be being a bit modest about it, but it was quite revolutionary at the time. And you had also a few things which you said that the way Pepsi should function. And once again in that, you used the word, we must cherish our colleagues, our staff, cherish. And that became, oh gosh, I mean, that was also a game changer, but it made a huge difference.
Look, at some point, you've got to use words that you're comfortable with. Some people might say, oh God, it sounds so woman. Yeah, I'm a female CEO. It sounds like me. So to me, the whole nourish, replenish, cherish, the 3 planks of purpose were words that I was comfortable with, and that's what I felt.
Right.
So I was trying to be authentic and say, this is how I want to run the company as long as I'm CEO. And, it takes a while for people to get used to this language, but that's okay. We're going to talk to you. We're going to make it part of your lexicon, but this is the language we're going to use to communicate what we're doing. You know, anytime you engage on anything that's disruptive or game-changing, there are going to be a lot of skeptics, people who don't like the language or the program or the investments or the initiatives. But if you believe in what you're doing, and if you have a true north as to where you're going, I think people will fall in line. And if they don't, you've got to get them out of the system.
And, you know, you do write that, and I think a lot of this was written before the pandemic, you do write that you believe in remote working. Like a lot of companies, I think including Google, says you can work from anywhere you want, anywhere in the world, you know, remotely. And come in when you want, don't come in. So remote working is something you think could be important for families?
I think that the one good thing that came out of the pandemic was technology developed so fast that we can now have remote working possible, and flexible work hours also become sort of acceptable. What we have to be very, very careful about, the soft skills are developed when people come and work in teams and see each other and can assess each other. We should not lose that ability to come together. Second, we shouldn't create two classes of citizens where those that come to work are looked at and treated differently than those that don't, in which case, once again, the men will go to work and the women will stay home. So I think we're in the early stages of figuring out how this is all going to work, how a hybrid structure is going to work. But I'm very optimistic that technology is going to help us enable remote working, and therefore young family builders can actually manage home and work in a much more seamless way than they could in the past.
Absolutely. And, you know, I have another about 200 questions, but you don't have 6 hours. So I'm going to ask last 2 questions. You know, when you, they made a portrait of you at the Smithsonian, and you had 4 things put behind you, which you put behind you, which exemplify your life. Tell us about those 4 pictures or photographs or objects and how they really were the 4 key, the anchors of your life.
It was an unusual portrait because nobody had ever put up a portrait with stuff that impacted their lives. Most of the portraits in the portrait gallery were just a portrait of the individual with pretty much an abstract background of flowers or something. In my case, I made a deliberate choice to include 4 items that made a huge difference to my life. The first is a photograph of my parents. It was actually painted. They took a photograph and painted from it because my parents brought me into the world. The second photograph, very important, is my husband and 2 daughters. They are the reason I am who I am, and I thought it was very important that they be in the portrait. The third is a cap, a baseball cap with the Yale School of Management logo on it. Yale School of Management.
A baseball cap.
A baseball cap, and I'll talk about that. It was a double message. One is the fact that Yale School of Management launched me into this big career and taught me a lot of things about the intersection of society and business. And baseball, because I love baseball and I love the Yankees. I would have loved to put a Yankees, but it didn't work. And the last is the PepsiCo annual report with the words performance with purpose, because this is not about just PepsiCo. I think all companies, all people should live under this motto of performance with purpose, whatever you do in your life. So these 4 items together define me.
No, I did see a tattoo on your forehead saying, I am Calcutta. But,
that's in my heart. That's in my heart.
That's in your heart.
In my heart.
Okay, last question. What next? Like your over 90s uncle-in-law says, I hope you're going to relax. And I know you're not. That's not possible. You then set an even worse example and work even harder. So what's next for Indra Nooyi?
You know, first is coming out of the book, I do want to work on how do we bring this care trifecta to life? How do we work on paid leave, job flexibility, and a care infrastructure to allow young family builders to have children and still engage in paid work? You know, Prannoy, I've been reading a lot about the Anganwadi system in India. I think it was a great idea when it was implemented. As with all great ideas, it goes through a drift. And I think there's an opportunity to create Anganwadi 4.0, not 1.0 or 2.0. I'm talking about 4.0, a whole new system which provides support for young families, especially families in rural India where the woman needs to work, needs to go out into the fields. She shouldn't have to take her child to the fields. Nurses shouldn't have to worry about their kids. Teachers, professions which are predominantly women, they have very little support structures. I would love to find a coalition of like-minded leaders in India and figure out how we give the Anganwadi system a big boost in one small region to test it out, and then figure out how to scale it. And at the same time, work with corporate sectors in India to see how to implement on-site and near-site childcare. I just saw a fantastic program by Tata Consumer Products on supporting young families. Brilliant. How do we scale that across India? So that's one thing. I'd like to do that in the US too, work with the brilliant minds like Anne-Marie Slaughter and Melinda Gates and Meera Money at the Hewlett Foundation. You're all doing amazing work.
No, come to India, then do America.
Got to do both. And so I think, how do you work on this care trifecta, something I want to spend my time and money on? In fact, the proceeds of the book are going to go into a foundation that's going to work on all of this. The second is, my board positions, whether it's Amazon, which is a consequential company whose board I sit on. I also sit on the board of Philips, Memorial Sloan Kettering. I still teach up at the West Point Military Academy. All of these are extremely fulfilling. And I intend to spend more time on all of these board assignments and give it my all. So I'm not going to sit idle at all. And I finally want to spend time with Raj and the kids. I do want to spend time with Raj and the kids.
Lovely, lovely. That you deserve. You're an inspiration, not just to women, but to men, and the way you function, the way you were a game changer in business and in various areas of life. I really only touched the tip of the iceberg of this really wonderful book. And it's great to know so much about your amazing life. Thank you for spending this time. I did want 6 hours though, but When
I come to India next, we'll sit down and have a meal. Good to see you, Prannoy. Thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you.